Okay, then the door is closed, so we can start with the workshop. Welcome everybody to this session. It's the workshop number 5, Intelligent Risk Management for Children and Youth in the Digital Age. My name is Jutta Kroll. I'm Managing Director of the German Center for Child Protection on the Internet, and there we mean child in the sense of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. That means everybody up to the age of 18. So I really appreciate that we have lots of young people as well here in the room talking about risk management for this age group. We were asked to have the workshop as an interactive session, and I've been to the other workshops during yesterday and this morning, and so I think we will be a little bit more interactive than most of the other sessions, and I hope that all those people gathering around at the walls will then join in to the table, because we have planned to do the session as a World Cafe, although we then had to learn that we cannot move the tables in these historic rooms, so we need to cope a little bit with the situation. We have 4 speaker or panelist tandems sitting in each of the corners, and I will introduce them to you when it's their turn to explain the topic they will deal with at the corner of the table. So first of all, I will just say something about what is this workshop about and what do we mean with intelligent risk management. And we intended to debate with you how we can see in respect of the legal framework of children's rights, which are freedom of speech and information, but also the right to privacy, can, on the other hand, be in a good collision with the duty of the parents to take care for their children and to safeguard them in their growing up, and also to safeguard them in their digital life. And so we want to talk with you about how we can bridge these rights of the child and the duties of the parents, and how this process, this big task, can be supported by different means. So we will talk about what can be done with positive content, which role can parental control by technical means play, what is safety by design, could that be an approach that will help parents in the process of safeguarding their children, and what about empowerment of children and youth themselves, how can we make them resilient to be able to grow up in the digital age and to benefit from the huge opportunities that digital media provide to them. So I would like to first start with the corner there on my left. That's John Carr, well-known expert, I would say, in any question about child protection on the internet, but also on usage of children and youth on the internet, and also a fighter against the digital divide, always calling for equal opportunities for all children from all societal groups. And then we have Lydia de Ries. She is responsible for the German whitelist offer FragFin, and I think she will explain a little bit by herself what that means. Would you mind to give it a start, John? So please hand over the microphone.
I need the microphone for it to appear on there. Yeah, I don't need it to be heard.
You need it also to be heard by the remote participants. So everything that's spoken into the microphone can be heard or read by the remote participants.
So there are some lucky people taking part who don't actually have to look at me. How fortunate for them compared with others. So so here's a kind of opening but obvious point, and I kind of referred to it yesterday as well in my intervention when I, if you remember, Robert, the Russian guy, said that young people shouldn't be treated as a special interest. And obviously that's not exactly what he meant, because he was referring to young adults, really. Because he accepted, if you remember him, when I asked from the floor, he accepted that children, that's to say people under the age of 18, are in a special and different class from people who are aged 18 or above. People aged 18 or above in international law are adults, and you'd be glad to hear I have nothing to say about what adults do on the internet, at least not in that particular connection. So children have legal rights to access the information. They have legal rights. I'm speaking under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. There are other instruments as well, but that's the founding legal document which every country in Europe has signed up to. So children and young people have a legal right to access information. They have a legal right to express their opinions. They have a legal right to associate with others. And there is no qualification or subtraction ascribed to the internet. In other words, those rights which have existed from the moment that treaty came into existence, which is 25 years ago now, apply equally in the online space as they do in the real world. So this is not a discretionary matter. It's not something which adults, because they choose to, will allow children or young people to do. They have a legal right to it, and I think that's an important starting point. Now, it has to be said that that right is qualified to some degree, because precisely because they are children or younger persons, they don't always have the same knowledge, they don't always have the same worldly experience as older people do. So states also have a right, an obligation, not a right, an obligation to try to make sure that children and young people in the real world and in the offline world, and in the online world, are not put in peril or not put in danger by being exposed to inappropriate content or inappropriate individuals, or that they're ripped off through scams and things of that kind. So there are those two things which are need balancing. And unfortunately, what we often hear about is what children shouldn't do. You know, we have filters to block access to content which is forbidden or which is not considered to be good. What we very rarely hear about is the positive content, the positive materials, the good things that are on the internet, which children and young people can benefit from, and if only they knew about it, or only if they were only directed towards it. So, and it's a great pity that parents are not so aware of that aspect of the internet as they are about the bad stuff, because it's certainly our experience in our that if you direct children, or if you point children and young people towards positive content that they find engaging or they find useful or that they find to be fun, that's where they will go. It's only very often it's the case that kids end up in bad places because they don't know where the good places are. So we all have a big job and a big responsibility to develop positive content, to make it available and widely promoting it, not just to, obviously, to the children and young people themselves, but also to their parents and to teachers and so on. And it shouldn't always be a conversation about, don't look at this, don't go to that site, don't do this. One of the reasons why this is important, by the way, is that there is a myth around that every child or every young person, that's to say basically most of the human race that are not as old as me, is a super cool dude, or dudette, whichever the phrase is, who is completely happy and relaxed about going on the internet. They're constantly out there looking for this new experience or that new experience. It's not true. If you look at the research that's been done by Sonia Livingston and by others as well, a lot of children and young people are just as conservative, with a small c, in their use of the internet as adults are. In fact, they tend to go to a relatively small number of sites, a relatively restricted number of sites. Now, of course, there are plenty of young people around who are Uber users or super cool nerds and that kind of stuff, but the majority of children and young people are not like that. They stick to sites that they know, that their friends are on and so on, and they're not experimenting as much as I think the popular imagination would have us believe, and newspaper reports would have us believe. And again, that's perhaps a sign of their lack of awareness of a lot of the positive stuff and a lot of the good materials that are out there, and it also indicates the importance of making sure that, therefore, that they are. Just, we're not supposed to speak for a few minutes at the beginning, you'll be glad to hear, so I'll just start winding down a bit. There is a level at which this question becomes slightly, well, redundant, maybe. 38% of 3- and 4-year-old children in the United Kingdom, at any rate, I'm sure it's the same in Germany and elsewhere, are 38% of 3- and 4-year-old children are now regularly accessing the internet. 6% of 3- and 4-year-old children are accessing the internet through a tablet device which is considered to be theirs, right? This is 3- and 4-year-olds accessing their own, accessing the internet through a tablet. And those figures, by the way, they were published in Britain based on research that was completed in October of last year. In other words, before Christmas of last year. Now, at Christmas of last year, the number one electronic device that was being sold to parents to give to their children was a tablet. And the reason for that was several companies have now brought out very inexpensive tablets. You know, there's even one for £40, so what, €50, with full internet connectivity built in. The graphics are not brilliant, it has to be said, on that very cheap one, but nonetheless, that's the way prices have been going. And so my guess is now that the proportion of 3- and 4-year-olds in Britain who've got their own tablet and are accessing the internet will have gone up considerably. Now, it's very difficult, you know, when you're speaking about children of that age, 3- and 4-year-old, to have the same sort of discussions as you would, say, about the rights of some of the young people. Did I say children? Young people who I can see sitting around this table. You can't apply the same rules to a 3- and 4-year-old as you can to 16, 17-year-olds, and that's absolutely clear. Now, the next thing I'm going to say, many of you in this room will find very, very hard to believe, but I promise you it's true. I am a grandfather. I know, you're saying, how could he be? He looks so young. I am a grandfather, right? My granddaughter is now 10 months old. About 3 months ago, thank you, Mazel Tov. 3 months ago, my daughter, her mother, put her iPad on the floor in the living room, on the carpet, and my granddaughter crawled across it, and somehow her foot and her hand managed to press the 2 bits of the screen, which allowed her to take the youngest ever selfie, right? I have a selfie of my granddaughter's nostrils, right? She hasn't yet worked out how to make an email attachment of it, and she doesn't have a Facebook account to put it up on yet. But the serious point in that story is, of course, younger and younger people are using these devices. And I think the discussion that we have about very young children using these technologies, it has to be different from the discussion we have about older ones.
We want them to learn how to use it, how to build up their competences, but also to let them participate online and to make themselves heard. So that's how we built up this search engine for children, which is based on a whitelist. So children using this search engine can only find the 11,000 websites we checked beforehand and put into the search index of this search engine. And this is their safe surfing environment, so to say, but they are also invited to participate to make this surf environment bigger. They can send us links to websites which are not included yet, and we will check this and try to include the websites which are still missing into this search engine. So that's something we find is very important, that there's also or already a lot of positive content and services out there, but it's very hard for children and parents to find. John said this already. So we think starting points for children on the internet are a crucial thing. They need starting pages, search engines, communication video platforms. We have a very good one in Germany, Yuki. So platforms and websites which are only made for them, specifically made for them, but which enable them to take part and to be creative on the internet. And another important thing is to give producers and developers of online content and services good advice on how to make great content for them. So that's a very important thing we work on FragFin, but especially on the European project of PostCon. We made a set of guidelines for producers they can turn to and have this checklist to see what can I think about if I want to do a website or a communication platform. What do I have to think about to make it really good and safe also for children to use?
Thank you, Lydia. If I'm right, it's when parents want to ensure that the children only serve on the FragFin whitelist, they need to use also some technical tools.
That's true.
To be sure that you not only recommend your child go to FragFin, but that you ensure that they only can use these websites. And I think that turns us to the next speakers, which is Elizabeth, and I'm not sure whether I'm able to pronounce your Russian surname, Milovidov?
That's me, the Russian.
Okay. Just to see. Yes, because you're accompanied by Narine Khachaturian, and that's also difficult for me to pronounce, who comes from Armenia. And both come more from the educational part, I would say, than from the technical part. But nonetheless, you're supposed to talk about how education can be supported by parental control tools, by technical means, and what role that can play. Do you have a microphone?
Okay. Thank you. First, I just want to say that I do agree with John that we should point children to positive content, but the reality is that there is a lot of things out there that children, and especially young children, not you guys, that they shouldn't see. There are pornographic sites, hate sites, anorexia, self-harm, cutting, etc. I think that while communication and involvement is great, which is one of the things that I do, is I coach parents on how to be more involved in their children's lives. I think that younger children, they may need a hand, and they may need a hand by technical means. John had mentioned earlier a statistic about the 3 to 4-year-olds in the UK. There's also an interesting statistic that was done by BBC earlier this year that said 1 in 4 young people say that they saw online pornography by the age of 12. Of those 1,000 people that were questioned, 7% were 10 or younger when they first saw internet porn. I think that's a nice segue into our topic on parental controls by technical means. This originated in the 1990s, actually, and it was on personal computers for parents to have some sort of control. Now we find those types of controls on televisions, laptops, computers, gaming consoles, mobile phones. Basically, there are 5 main functions of parental controls. We see content filtering, privacy protections, monitoring, use restrictions, and contact management. Hopefully when you come and we discuss in our workshop, we'll talk about each of these functions and how we can weigh it against the rights of the child, the rights to freedom, to privacy, to expression. And again, we'll look at it in juxtaposition with parental duties. What should parents be doing? After saying all that, I'm going to let Narina say a few words, if you will.
Thank you very much. I would like to focus more on empowerment issues, since very protective approaches are not dominating in our country, and people believe that education and training can become much more helpful than parental control tools. Of course, we are not speaking of very small children, but starting from 10, 11-year-old children are very easy to handle those filtering tools, and that is why more and more teachers and educators are focusing on educational measures. And I would like also to speak of the challenges which are coming with new intelligent technologies and the skills which are necessary to meet those challenges. And the first challenge is that we need to, children need first of all to master the proper skills to take advantage of such technologies as Internet of Things, semantic web, big data, which could be very helpful for education and development, but at the same time they may become very manipulative. And I would like to bring some examples. Web personalization, which is now presented as a very, something very positive. This is technology which is offering tailored advertisement based on information gathered about users' online behavior, or predictive behavioral targeting, which is targeting advertisements based on predictions about users' future behavior and their interests. And at the same time, offline data can be incorporated into online targeting, and people are often not aware of the full impact of those technologies. And what is important that people very often are not aware that they are not only offered goods or services based on personal preferences, but also news. So the recent researches have shown that most people are aware that search engines produce neutral results. What risk do we see here? Due to web personalization, people become less and less confronted with opponent views. We do not coincide with their own views. And similarly, social network structure makes it difficult for challenging voices to reach us, and consequently, people become online discussion groups become more and more polarized, and there is a risk that people can be trapped in their way of thinking, locked up in their beliefs, stereotypes or prejudices. And there are a number of other manipulative techniques which we see a little bit, I'm not afraid of that word, dangerous, such as perception management, video manipulation, deliberate disinformation, or manufactured false realities. And we believe that young people need to develop high-level critical thinking skills in order to wisely search, select, and critically evaluate information coming from various sources. And this is the third challenge for us. And of course, the fourth challenge is related to fostering security and privacy consciousness among young people. And we think, and we try to do this in our country, we think that topics related to censorship, surveillance, data protection can be integrated into training programs. Young people need to be aware that, for instance, surveillance technologies, which are installed in shops for public safety purposes, can be used for advertising as well. Or young people need to be aware that they can be spied online while playing even online games. So I will be short and conclude with the fifth challenge, which is that to teach young people about their rights on the internet, and all those competencies should help young people to avoid manipulations of new intelligent technologies, to fully participate in their societies and gain from all the education and learning opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noreen. Before we come to the two young guys that we have for the topic of empowerment of children and youth, and ask them whether they feel educated about all these things and also the technical threats that you have mentioned, I would get back to what Elizabeth said about we have these different devices with which children can access the internet, children and young people, and we also have for the parents the task to manage that all. And at the moment we have a situation where most of the parental control tools work on one device or maybe on the other, but we don't have an integrated solution that can help parents to cope with that situation. And we all know that children are much more into the technical things, they understand better in many cases, and so it's a huge task for parents to understand how they can manage and give this safe environment to their children on all the different devices. And one idea is the concept of safety by design, and now I get to Tilman Greta, who is one of my colleagues at the German Center for Child Protection on the Internet, and Sabine Frank from Google, who both want to explain the concept of safety by design to you.
Well, thank you, Jutta. Is this the appropriate volume for this room? Everybody? Okay, thank you. Thanks for the chance to talk here. John Carr has mentioned the Christmas presents of tablets for minors before, and I want to take this as a start for the topic, the question of safety by design. I've prepared a little animation here at the billboard. You all know these lovely devices, a tablet computer, and now I think the animation won't start, so sir, would you be so kind to... Thanks. There's good reasons parents don't mind handing these to their children. There is, on the surface, there's no sharp corners. You won't see cables here. There's small sockets only, so small fingers won't fit into it in comparison to a decent desktop computer. So, but the question is, what about safety inside? And this leads us to safety by design. Safety by design is a principle that has been discussed recently at the eKids in expert groups and in media. And safety by design. Oh, here we go. Let's talk about safety by design. Safety by design is a principle about taking care of protection of minors as soon as in the development of products. Putting yourself questions like, will children and youth might use the product that is in development right now? What threats might that cause? Might the usage of children and youth be different from those of adults? And what threats will that cause? So putting these questions ahead of a release, you could design your products and services accordingly. And you might ask, why safety by design? Well, these are just some reasons that has been gathered. Putting protection of minors as early as in the development process, you'll have a cheaper development. Putting it beforehand is much better than putting it in later on. You'll have a robust code and you'll have a higher quality of product. You can have new business models, you'll have a reduction of liability risks, you have a higher usability, you all know this, and you might push for the standardization of interfaces and improve convergence. And the question, what I like to talk with you about is, might we, thinking of this principle, might we have a higher effectiveness of child protection? And Sabine Frank of Google will now talk about a little example.
Thank you. Very good to be with you here today. So, just a few examples, and allow me a few words before this. So, this is a Chrome example. So we have within Chrome 750 million users worldwide. So one thought which I think we all could have is, if we know that we have several platforms which we use, several hardware devices which we use, what could be a good tool to actually have online safety for family members? And this is not only about children, but if we look at how many elderly people are new to the internet and use tablets as well and use simple devices as well. So I think this is a whole set of questions we have here. So our first answer is Chrome supervised users. So this is a cross-platform idea. You can pre-select, you can open up an account for the supervised users. You don't have to have a Google account with us, so it's the manager who's actually managing the supervised user. You can create little items and bubbles for them. You have to press, and this is really important, you have to press for the supervised users this little box under the number 3, where you certainly say who is managing the supervised user. And then if you go, then you come to the dashboard, and within the dashboard you can manage that that supervised user. In this case it's Mia, could be someone else, could be, as I said, also your parents, not only your kids. And what you do here is, besides that, we have safe search and YouTube safety mode opted in, so it's automatically in there. You can decide whether you want to create a blacklist or a whitelist. We have heard from John and Elizabeth that kids usually have only a small set of websites they aim for, so this could be a very good starting point for them, where they actually go out and go about. One other thing that is, I think, important and is not really in the mindset of a lot of people is that we need to engage kids and parents more into a dialogue. So we have a lot of parents who don't really understand what the kids are doing online, what they wish to see, what websites they are interested in. So after creating blacklists or whitelists, which you may do, your kid can only also say, well, I would actually like to see a website which you have not whitelisted, and they request a permission. So this permission request goes then into the email account of you as parents, for example, and then you can allow or deny this. So you have a way to actually interact very automatically, and I think this allows parents and kids a meaningful discussion of what are they allowed to see online, and parents have a better idea what they're interested in. So the concept of safety by design, I think it's not only about safety inside, but also about a meaningful conversation that we need to aim for. And this is one thing we have introduced a while ago, and this is very early stage, but I hope this is something that goes in the right direction, and we as company will be very eager to hear your feedback and see how it goes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine and Tilman, for that short introduction to the approach of safety by design. We now turn to the youth, to Leonard and Luca. And I think you both seem not to be a supervised user, but maybe a supervisor to other users. I would like to hear afterwards what you think about that system. But first of all, we agreed that we will do now a short interview with you about your own experiences. And maybe you could tell us at first what are the most popular sites, services and apps that you and your young peers are using today, and do you see any risks in using that for yourself but also for younger people? Do you have a microphone? Can you hand over, please? Thank you.
Yeah, at first, I think the most popular sites we all know: Facebook, Twitter, maybe shopping, internet pages for shopping like Amazon or Zalando. And I think for young people, these websites are also very important, and they get more and more a fixed part in the daily life of us and the younger people. And I would say there are a few other very popular things like apps. You all know maybe the app Candy Crush Saga. You know?
Can you explain? I don't know it.
It's a game. It's connected with Facebook, and you need to it's like a puzzle, and yeah, it has some risks for young people. He will explain now. Yeah, and there are other things like services for young people, so they don't need in the internet, so they don't need to go out of the house. They aren't interacting. Yeah, that's the music of Candy Crush, and yeah, you see it. He uses it on itself. Yeah, yeah, and the risks, will explain.
Okay, thank you first. And then I think one of the biggest problems with these apps, services and sites is the time wasting. You have to invest a lot of time in such apps or sites, and I think the people often don't know how much time they spend in front of the windows of their computer or cell phone.
So you would say like a time control or monitoring of the time you've spent would be useful for you?
Yeah, till a special age.
Okay.
I think with 16 or 17, you have to learn how much time you should spend with such sites, apps, services, and it's important that you get to know this by your own.
Okay, so it needs a little bit training to manage how much time you spend. Okay, then I don't know how it was in your family, but what I learned from many talks to parents is that they are looking for technical support. They feel a little bit confused about everything, and so they get the feeling if I have some technical tool on the computer, I can at least have some safety for my children. Some of these tools only, like it was described before, act like a filter. They prevent children from coming across some inappropriate content, which could be pornography, but also racist content or something like that. But on the other hand, there are more and more tools that monitor what children are doing, that can give the parents complete control to see what children have been doing. And it goes so far that on mobile devices we have GPRS tracking where parents can check where their children are at the moment. What do you think about those tools? And have you ever discussed with your parents? Have they made an attempt to control you in that way?
I will now comment on your first part of the question. The technical tools for safety in while searching in the internet. I think it's very important that young people are getting controlled by their parents a bit, so they don't get in contact with these adult contents, because they can have a negative effect on the development and the education of these children. But I think it should always be limited, because when you grow up, you need to be able to find these sites who are critical. You need to get in contact with them, so you know the dangers and the risks, so you know what is forbidden and what not. Because when you then are 18, when you are 18, and then there is no more control from your parents, so you are you never got in contact with these critical sites. You don't know how to deal with them, and you don't know anything about the problems. So I think it should be limited for the age the people are at the moment. Yeah, and
anything to add?
Yeah, I think the role in this clash between protection of the children and the liberty of the children is the parents should give a safety framework, when you would call it like this, so the people can educate them, in a safety way.
Yeah, in the session before this workshop here in the room, it was discussed about freedom of expression, and the whole discussion went 1 hour, and never was mentioned that freedom of expression is also a fundamental right to children. It's not only that when you're 18 then you have the right to information and the right to freedom of expression, as well as privacy is a right that you have from birth. So, have you ever had a discussion about that with your parents, for example, or with your teachers? Is it a topic that do children and young people know that they have these rights? And you've called it a clash between the interest of the parents and the child. But do you think that most of the young people are aware of that situation?
Yeah, I think the most of the children know where the problems are, maybe, because in our age, I'm talking about our age, but in the young generations who are now growing, who are now about 6, 7 years old, who are maybe on the same technical level as we are now at the moment, because they start using a tablet or a smartphone in such young ages. So we need to have a look on the special, on the maybe also on the character of the special children, because the relationship between the parents and the children is always the most important part in the development and the using of the internet. The privacy on this side is maybe all the children know about their privacy and their rights, and I have the opinion that parents shouldn't look in emails or read letters, because they don't want that we do that too, but they should control on in which they should create a framework on which sites and on what networks the children can communicate with each other. And I think that's the most important part, and you should have a discussion between the children and the parents, maybe at the table while eating something else. It should be an issue in the daily life.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that perspective of from your age. So we planned to do now the World Cafe, and we will discuss these 4 topics: the positive content, the parental control by technical means, safety by design, and empowerment of children and youth at the 4 corners of the table. But before you go to the tables, and you are free to discuss all of the 4 topics, move around the table, or if you decide only to discuss with John or with Luca and Leonard or Elizabeth or Sabine and Tillman, it's up to you. But before we start that, I would like to ask whether we have some comments from remote participants? No comments, okay. Anything in the room that should be said right now to the plenary before we go in the smaller group discussions? Okay, Janice?
Yes, picking up on something that Nareen said earlier, and I'd very much like to hear the point of view of young people. It's something called packaging of information. And Nareen pointed out that in fact nowadays we're only getting the information that suits our point of view, and this can lead to stereotyping. We're not getting the full picture as we used to do, for example, with newspapers. Another problem with this is that it's got to be spectacular all the time. So we're not really getting information, but just what we're looking for and what can catch our attention. I'd like to know or hear a little about the young people's point of view of this, because I think sometimes it's too easy to look at the easy problems, stop seeing things that are not meant for young children, but we're not really looking at the deeper issues. So what do young people think about this? Because I think it can also guide the way we work in our groups. Thank you.
Could you please summarize your question one more time?
What do you think about the fact that you are getting fed information that suits the searches that you have been doing, that suits the ideas that you have been putting out? So what do you think about information being shaped for you, whereas you think that you are free with your information?
It's a difficult question, I would say. And if I may add, Janice said, as it was more free information with the newspaper. Yes, that's right, but only if you choose to read 3 or 4 newspapers a day, because if you choose only one, and we have one very big newspaper in Germany, with a small word in the title, then you only get one opinion and not the broad variety. So I would not say that it's completely different with newspapers than now with the internet. But what I think the question is, do you feel comfortable with that situation? Do you see that you get sometimes a pre-selection of information?
Janice, I think, sorry, Jutta, I think it's slightly broader than that, and I agree it's an extremely important one. Even if you read that horrible German newspaper whose name you wouldn't mention, the fact is, if you just turn the pages, you're going to see a story about crime, you're going to see a story about football, English football, of course, because that's the most important football. You're going to see a story about foreign affairs. But if you've set up news feeds, or if you've set up your timelines or whatever it might be, you're going to get stories always on the same topics. And it's not true that you don't have, therefore, the same sort of liberty or the same serendipity. You know, one of the great things about going into a library with actual books, for example, and the same with a newspaper, is you can trip over things. You're more likely to. But if you're just getting feeds about the same stuff all the time, you're only talking to the same, you're in a group that's only interested in one thing or another, we call it ghettoization. You end up in silos and ghettos, and the possibilities for breaking out are reduced.
So, but the question went to Luca and Leonard, so please, it's your turn to answer.
Yeah,
first.
Maybe I would say in every newspaper you will find a political way how it is described. And so there is also a selection in the newspapers. And you shouldn't just read one newspaper every morning. You should read a few articles about the same theme. And that's the same in the internet. If you can choose between so many articles and information platforms that you can complete your maybe your silo on this special information theme. So I wouldn't say that there is such a special categorization in the internet. I would say you should be able, it is on your own how you use the internet, but the potential to get many information who are, it's your free decision on which page you go, so there isn't any control.
But that needs media education to understand that.
Yeah, it's, but normally the people who read a newspaper aren't young children, normally. I wouldn't say that I read newspapers when I was 4 or 5 years old. Maybe I took a look inside of it, read one article I was interested in, but I wouldn't say that I read 10 newspapers a day with 5 years. So that's the same now. So if we use the internet, I think we know how to get on with this information.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. One comment from Sabine, and then you, and then we try to discuss like a World Cafe.
I would just like to echo what just has been said. I think the ability to get multiple information is much, much higher than before the digital age. I mean, who did read 10 newspapers? Just like a few people did. So you do have the possibilities to go across platforms and search for different articles. You have also the possibility to search, like using being lucky searches, etc. You're not bound to just stay in your social network and get your stream, but do more. So I think it's about you being an active user and you seeking for information. But once you have that mindset that you want to do this, your ability to get more information is much higher. But I do see that discussion also in the context of positive content, because if we speak about creating lists for children, then I think this idea of we need to make sure that we have actually a broad variety of different views, different contents is actually very important to keep in mind. But this is an absolutely different discussion than the general discussion which we usually have about like a small version of the net you only get.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. There's one question I wanted to ask about those 4 groups you just introduced, because after all, we're here at the dialogue on internet governance, and to me, governance means what the state, what the government can do to influence the internet. So in this case, it means how to assist children not to be abused on the internet. That's what I think the government should do. Now, of course, we've had this discussion in Germany like a few years ago, the question of blocking websites, and it was just voted down by some people who didn't want blocking of websites, which I think was a very bad thing for protection of children, but that's the way things are at the moment in this country. So I was just wondering if this is also a topic for this room, because if we're talking about internet by design or safety by design, what I've heard was examples like Chrome browser being adopted, which is just a personal thing, or you have parents watching their children, which is good, I think, but that's not really design. That just depends on the parent, and if the parent is not able or doesn't know about the internet, he can't do that. And then of course, we have Frag Finn. Now, I was a couple of years ago. I was teaching a group of young children how to use the internet. I did this for a couple of years with different groups of children, and I think the first lesson we started with Frag Finn, and all of them had heard about Frag Finn, of course, but then it took about 5 minutes, and they said, now we want to talk about the real internet and not about the baby internet, which is Frag Finn. So I think if we talk about design of the internet, we shouldn't really talk about small corners where well-meaning people want to force children into, because I think children want the real internet. They want to do what their parents do. So I think it's misleading to say we are creating small islands for children and we expect them to stay there. That's not going to work.
Thank you so much for your comment. I would like to, regards your first question, refer to the title of the workshop, which is Intelligent Risk Management. And this comes from several years ago. It was 2007 when the Hans Bredow Institute evaluated the German system of use protection. And they came out with that term, we need an intelligent risk management. We have several risks in various areas, and we need an intelligent system that we can build on. And that was the reason why we decided to talk about these 4 pillars we see that can build up that intelligent system of risk management. And I think we could go now into the 4 groups. We have the task to phrase some messages from Berlin that shall go from the EuroDIG to the Internet Governance Forum, which will be held in the first week of September in Istanbul this year. And so it would be really useful if we could phrase some of these messages. How can the concept of safety by design help? And I would say it's not safety, it's not design of the internet, it's safety that is thought from the beginning. So and if you think you have a good input to that, you should come to this corner of the table and just discuss with the people who have some expertise for the concept of safety by design. But also for the positive content, I think there could be said a lot of things about what do we force children into small corners I would not say 11,000 URLs are a small corner for children, and I also would expect that younger children would not see that it's the baby internet. It's, it's more than that, but that all could be discussed around the table. And those chairs on the walls, they are not fixed. You can move up to the corners of the table. Just do that, and we can only save now, I think, 5 minutes at the end of the session where we can bring these 4 messages that you can work out at the table then to the whole plenary. Thank you.
May I have? Yeah, I would like to come back to web personalization and why we think that this is very important. So. Just one example, when a person is looking for pornography online, search engines tend to present you with what you are looking for more and more. They are not just random results. If you look, different people, when they search for the same keywords, they receive different results based on their previous web history. And what is more even important, that sometimes offline data can be incorporated as well. So I think that this is very important if we are looking ways if we are discussing the safety of children, we should keep this in mind.